I guess this was meant to be a horror comedy? I didn't really see a lot of the comedy in it. So, Howl is a new werewolf horror comedy. This is a film from the UK and about a bunch of passengers on a night train going through the countryside that somehow get stranded. And unfortunately for all the passengers, the woods around them is full of werewolves. And that's the basic premise of Howl. Now, I'm definitely not going to say that I totally disliked this film. I thought it was a pretty alright horror movie, pretty alright werewolf movie that has a pretty basic but neat concept. I did like the characters, and even though most of them are stereotypical to a train ride, you get your annoying passengers, your older passengers, different sorts of types that you'd expect on the train if you've ridden a train anywhere. Some of them help with the horror tropes, and sometimes those horror tropes and those stereotypical passengers do get fleshed out a little bit and get a little bit developed. I have to hand it to Howl for that. I really liked our main character. Our main character is one of those types of people. He's too nice of a person. Main character is a nice guy, but he's not a go-getter. He wants to be a supervisor, but the problem is he doesn't like to tell people off. He doesn't like to make them have to buy a ticket if they don't have a ticket and a few other things. He's a bit of a wimp. And to be honest, he's one of those characters in the horror movie that tend to get killed off right away. He feels like that type of character, but he develops, he becomes a little bit more of a leader, and he does have a total character arc in this film. And I thought he was acted really well. In fact, I thought all the acting was pretty good. The whole film has a really nice visual style with the lighting and the camera work. It feels a little bit like the kind of movies that try to have a comic book style. It's not quite like that, but it has a very similar feeling to it. Now, it does get a little too dark at times, like the light, but for the most part you can see what's going on. There's a lot of great practical effects and visual effects in the film. And while it's supposed to be a horror comedy, I didn't feel it like a horror comedy in the way most people would see it. There are comedic elements to it. There's a lot of really good one-liners, a lot of back and forth between characters that are funny, and it does sort of become aware that they're in a horror movie from time to time. But I wouldn't say it's a horror comedy. I just feel like it's a serious horror movie with a few sprinkled comedic moments within it. Never once did the scenes feel like it took a total blend with the comedy and the horror at the same time, like many others did this year. Unless I was completely missing things and it was meant to be stereotypical in a poking fun at horror movie sort of way, it just felt too serious and too stereotypical of other horror movies to the point there's not a lot of originality to it. There is some, obviously, but to be honest, it is pretty typical horror and typical werewolf movie. I honestly did like a lot of the characters that were still alive by the end of the movie and throughout the middle of the movie. And I love that the movie knows what characters are going to be the annoying characters and kills them off right away. Like, they're the first two to die. The two that I thought would be the annoying ones in the movie are the first to die. Of course, you have your stereotypical douchebag in the movie, and he did a really good job, and they did a really good job at developing him as well, because it's funny, he starts off as the leader of the group. He feels like the one that'll do anything to get out of the situation, but because of that, he becomes pretty much the dick of the movie. One of the main issues I had with the film, other than feeling like stereotypical horror, is that, well, I didn't like the werewolf design all that much. When you see the first werewolf and you see its design and it's pretty much in a lot of light, it was really off-putting for me. It didn't feel like a werewolf, even though it was pretty much a typical blend of human and werewolf. I mean, it was pretty much 50-50, so it kind of resembles a werewolf, but his face, I'm just not a big fan of the werewolves that have human faces, like too human of faces, and this one had a full human face with fangs. Well, just sharp teeth, actually, not fangs. However, I was really liking a lot of the werewolves in the woods towards the end of the movie, when you see them in shadow and all you see is their glowing eyes. I thought that was handled extremely well. When the werewolves were in the dark, they looked amazing. When they were in the light, I just wasn't a big fan of them. Also, I feel this movie slows down a lot. It's one of those things where it slows down to try to do a little bit of build character, and these characters have conversations, so they become a little bit more complex. But I didn't see it as that. It felt a little bit more boring than most character development moments, because it felt like, okay, there's a horrific event, and then boom, we slow it down, have some characters talking, and then boom, horrific event, and then characters talking again, slow, and boom, character. It was an apparent pattern towards the middle of the movie, and so the middle of the movie for me really slowed down and bogged down with these slower moments. Other than that, I thought Howl was a pretty alright horror movie. If you're a big fan of werewolves and horror movies, try it out. You might like it a lot more than me. For me, I'm going to give Howl 2.5 stars. So have you seen Howl? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If not, what is your favorite werewolf movie? As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was just my opinion.